I need to tell you about something that happened to me in grad school. Not because I'm looking for sympathy, and definitely not because I think I'm special. I'm telling you this because for years I couldn't talk about it at all, and now that enough time has passed, I realize the silence was part of what made it so corrosive. My name is Ian. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a house that smelled like coffee and old books. My dad taught high school English. My mom was a librarian at the public library downtown. We weren't poor, but we also weren't the kind of family that took vacations or bought new cars. Everything we had was functional and slightly worn. I remember my dad's study was full of paperbacks with cracked spines, organized by author in this elaborate system only he understood. He'd spend Saturday mornings in there, classical music playing softly, marking up student essays with a red pen that never seemed to run out of ink. I was a quiet kid, not shy exactly, just more comfortable in my own head than in groups. I read constantly, fantasy novels mostly at first. Then I got into science fiction, the hard kind with actual physics and engineering problems. By high school, I was reading popular science books, the kind that try to explain quantum mechanics or evolutionary biology to regular people. I found it fascinating how you could take something impossibly complex and break it down into pieces that made sense. I wasn't the smartest kid in my class. I wasn't the most athletic or the most popular, but I had this ability to understand systems, how things connected, how processes worked, how information flowed from one place to another. My dad noticed it when I was helping him organize his filing system for lesson plans. He'd say, "You see patterns I don't see, Ian. That's valuable." I went to Ohio State for undergrad, stayed home, commuted, saved money, majored in information science with a focus on digital archives and data management. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody at parties wanted to hear about metadata standards or preservation protocols, but I loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about taking chaotic information and making it accessible, useful, permanent. I did well enough to get into a decent graduate program. Not Ivy League, but a solid state university with a strong information science department. Let's call it Midwestern State University. It had a reputation for practical research, for solving real-world problems rather than publishing theoretical papers nobody would read. That appealed to me. I wanted to do work that mattered. The program was small, maybe 20 grad students total across all specializations. That meant everyone knew everyone. The faculty was tight-knit too. 5 full professors, a handful of adjuncts and visiting scholars. The department occupied the 3rd floor of the library building, which I took as a good omen. We had access to the university's entire digital infrastructure, all the archives, all the databases. For someone like me, it was paradise. I started in August. The air in the Midwest that time of year is thick and hot, but the library was always cold, over-air-conditioned to protect the old books in the rare collections room. I loved that building, loved the quiet, the smell of paper and floor polish, the way sound got absorbed into carpet and shelves. I'd arrive early most mornings, make terrible coffee in the department lounge, and settle into my carrel on the 3rd floor with whatever reading I'd been assigned. The first semester was coursework, information architecture, research methods, digital preservation theory. I fell into a rhythm quickly. Class in the morning, reading in the afternoon, working the reference desk at the library a few evenings a week to cover my stipend. I was happy, genuinely happy. I felt like I'd found my place. The department had one superstar faculty member, Dr. Raymond Kellerman. He'd been there 15 years, published 2 influential books about digital humanities, consulted with major institutions, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, big university archives. He had this presence, this way of talking about information systems like they were living things. In seminars, he'd pace back and forth, gesturing with his hands, building these elaborate arguments about how we preserve cultural memory in the digital age. It was compelling. Everyone wanted to work with him. I didn't plan to be one of those people. Kellerman seemed unapproachable, always busy, always in meetings or traveling to conferences. But in October of my first year, he announced a new project during a department meeting. The university had received a significant grant, nearly $2 million, to digitize and create a searchable database of regional historical newspapers from the 1850s through the 1960s. Hundreds of thousands of pages. It would require developing new optical character recognition protocols, creating a custom metadata schema, building a public-facing interface. It was ambitious, important work, the kind of thing that could become a model for other institutions. Kellerman was looking for graduate research assistants. He'd take on 3 or 4 students to help with different aspects of the project. It would mean more hours, more responsibility, but also a chance to work on something real, something that would exist in the world after we graduated. I applied, wrote a careful proposal about my interest in preservation and access, my technical skills, my belief that historical documents should be freely available to anyone who wanted to learn from them. I didn't expect to get it. There were second and third year students with more experience, better connections to faculty, but Kellerman picked me. He called me into his office in late October, right before Halloween. His office was corner space with windows overlooking the quad, crammed with books and papers and old coffee cups. He sat behind his desk and looked at me with these sharp gray eyes and said, "Your proposal was the most thoughtful. You actually care about the work, not just the resume line. I think you'll be good for this." I felt like I'd won something, like I'd been chosen for a team I desperately wanted to be on. The project team was 4 students, me, a second year named Bryce Callahan, a third year named Angela Reyes, and another first year named Connor Wells. Bryce was Kellerman's golden boy, smart, confident, always prepared, always saying exactly what Kellerman wanted to hear. Angela was quiet and methodical, excellent with data structures. Connor was fine, eager, a little sloppy, but well-meaning. We had our first full team meeting in November. Kellerman laid out the scope. Phase 1 would be preparing the physical documents. The newspapers were stored in the university's special collections, fragile and yellowed. Phase 2 was the actual digitization, high-resolution scanning. Phase 3 was OCR and quality control. Phase 4 was building the database architecture. Phase 5 was the user interface and public launch. "This will take 2 years minimum," Kellerman said. "It's going to be tedious at times, frustrating, but when we're done, we'll have created something genuinely valuable, something that will serve researchers for generations." I believed him. I believed every word. The work started slowly. We spent November and December doing preliminary assessments, cataloging the newspaper volumes in special collections, testing different scanning equipment, researching existing OCR software to see what could be adapted for 19th century typefaces. I was assigned to the technical side. My job was to evaluate the software options, run test scans, document error rates, and make recommendations about which tools we should use. I worked constantly, 15-20 hours a week on top of my coursework. I didn't mind. The problem was interesting. Historical newspapers had inconsistent fonts, poor print quality, physical damage from age. Standard OCR software produced garbage. I started experimenting with machine learning approaches, training recognition algorithms on sample pages, tweaking parameters to improve accuracy. By January, I had a working prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was significantly better than anything else I'd tested. I brought my results to the weekly team meeting, showed Kellerman the accuracy rates, where commercial software was getting maybe 60% accuracy on damaged documents. My modified approach was getting close to 85%. Kellerman looked at my data for a long time. Then he looked at Bryce. "What do you think?" Bryce leaned forward, studied my charts. "It's promising. I'd want to see more testing with different document types. But yeah, this could work." Kellerman nodded slowly. "Good work, Ian. Keep refining it." "Bryce, I want you to take lead on documenting the methodology. We'll need to write this up for a conference presentation." I felt a small twist in my stomach. I'd done the work, but Bryce would lead the write-up. But I told myself it made sense. Bryce was more advanced, more experienced with academic writing. This was how research teams worked. Everyone contributed. We moved into Phase 2 in February. The actual scanning began. The special collections librarian would bring up carts of newspaper volumes, and we'd carefully scan page after page. It was monotonous work, but it had to be done right. Each page had to be perfectly flat, evenly lit, scanned at high enough resolution to capture every detail. I continued developing the OCR system. By March, I'd improved the accuracy to 90% on most documents. I'd created custom training sets for different time periods, different printing styles. I'd built tools to help human reviewers quickly identify and correct errors. I'd documented everything meticulously, every decision, every parameter choice, every test result. The team met every Tuesday afternoon. Kellerman would review our progress, assign new tasks, solve problems. Increasingly, though, when he discussed the technical work, my work, he'd address his questions to Bryce. "How are we handling date formatting inconsistencies?" I'd start to answer, but Bryce would jump in. "Ian found that we could use a probabilistic parser to..." "Good. Make sure that's in the documentation." It happened again and again. I'd do the work. I'd bring the results. Bryce would present them. Kellerman would praise Bryce's judgment. By April, Kellerman started bringing Bryce to meetings with the project's external advisory board. These were the university administrators and librarians who'd secured the grant, who had oversight of the budget and timeline. I'd hear about these meetings secondhand, usually from Angela. "Kellerman's really positioning Bryce as the technical lead," she told me once. "I think he wants to put Bryce on the conference circuit next year." I told myself it was fine. I was learning. I was building skills. The work itself mattered more than who got credit, but it bothered me. It bothered me that Bryce hadn't written a single line of code, that he couldn't explain the technical decisions without looking at my documentation, that when other faculty asked him questions about the methodology, he'd say, "Let me check with Ian," and then present my answer as his own conclusion. The first real crack came in May. We were preparing a progress report for the grant agency. Kellerman asked each of us to write a summary of our contributions. I wrote 3 pages detailing the OCR development, the testing, the machine learning approach, the accuracy improvements, the review tools. I included screenshots, data tables, clear documentation of what I'd built. The final report came out a week later. In the section on OCR development, there were 3 paragraphs. The work was accurately described, but it was credited to the technical team led by Bryce Callahan, with support from Ian Brennan and Connor Wells. Support. I'd built the entire system from scratch, and I was listed as support. I went to Kellerman's office, knocked on his door, waited until he waved me in. He was editing something on his laptop, didn't look up. "Dr. Kellerman, I wanted to talk about the progress report." "The OCR section. It lists Bryce as the lead, but I did all the development work. I built the algorithms, ran all the tests, created all the tools." He finally looked at me. His expression was patient, slightly annoyed. "Ian, you have to understand how academic research works. Bryce has been managing the technical direction of this project. He's been coordinating with me, making strategic decisions, representing our work to external stakeholders. Yes, you've done important implementation work, but leadership is about more than writing code. I'm not just writing code. I'm making the technical decisions. I'm solving the problems. Under Bryce's guidance. Bryce doesn't understand the technical details. He couldn't answer a question about the system without asking me first. Kellerman's voice got colder. What Bryce understands is how to work professionally in a research environment. He knows how to communicate with senior scholars. He knows how to represent work in a way that builds the project's reputation. Those are skills you'll develop with time. So I do the work and he gets the credit. Ian. He took off his glasses, set them on his desk. You're a first-year student. You're talented, no question. But you need to learn how collaborative research operates. No one gets individual credit for everything they contribute. We succeed or fail as a team. Right now, you're letting your ego interfere with your judgment. Ego. That word landed like a slap. I'd been working 25 hours a week on his project. I'd solved a major technical challenge, and expressing concern about accurate credit was ego. I left, his office shaking, went back to my carrel, stared at my computer screen without seeing it. That night I called my dad, described what was happening, tried to keep my voice level. He listened quietly, the way he always did. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Ian, he finally said, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that in my experience, when people in power tell you that you're being difficult, what they usually mean is that you're making their life less convenient. So what do I do? You decide what you can live with. The project continued through the summer. I kept working, but something had changed. I started documenting everything more carefully. Every email, every technical decision, every meeting note. I kept copies of my code, my test results, my design documents in a personal repository, separate from the project's shared files. In June, Kellerman submitted a conference proposal to a major digital humanities conference. The proposal was about our OCR methodology. Bryce was listed as first author. Kellerman was second. I was third. Connor and Angela weren't listed at all. The proposal was accepted. The conference was in October in San Francisco. Kellerman told Bryce that he'd be presenting, that this would be his introduction to the broader research community, that it was an important opportunity for his career. I asked if I could attend the conference. Kellerman said the grant didn't have budget to send multiple students. Bryce needed to be there because he was presenting. Maybe next year. I spent July and August watching Bryce prepare the presentation. He'd come to me with questions. How exactly did the training algorithm work? What were the key parameters? Why did we choose this approach over that one? I'd explain, and he'd take notes, and then he'd go practice his talk with Kellerman. In September, a graduate student from another department stopped by my carrel. His name was Paul. He was in computer science, and he'd heard about our newspaper project. Someone told me you built some impressive OCR tech, he said. I'm working on a similar problem with historical documents. Would you be willing to share your approach? I walked him through the methodology, showed him some of the code, explained the machine learning architecture. He was genuinely interested, asked smart questions, understood the technical challenges. This is really sophisticated work, he said. You should publish this separately from the project, like a technical paper about the algorithm itself. It's part of the grant project. I can't just publish independently. Why not? You built it. It's complicated. He looked at me for a long moment. Let me guess. Someone else is getting credit? I didn't answer. Yeah, he said. That happens a lot in labs. The grad students do the work. The PI's favorite gets the authorship. The PI gets the reputation. It's a shit system. After he left, I sat there thinking about what he'd said. The grad students do the work. I'd heard versions of this story before, everyone had. It was supposedly just how academia operated. You paid your dues, you built your reputation slowly, and eventually, if you were lucky, you became the person whose name went on top. But something about it felt fundamentally wrong, not just unfair, but structurally broken. We were creating knowledge, supposedly in service of truth and learning, but the system ran on exploitation and credit theft. The conference happened in October. I followed along on Twitter, watching people post photos and quotes from the sessions. Bryce's presentation was apparently well received. Multiple tweets mentioned the innovative OCR approach and impressive accuracy rates and promising methodology for historical digitization. One tweet included a photo of Bryce standing in front of his slides, smiling confidently. The slides were the ones I'd created, my charts, my diagrams, my screenshots. When Bryce got back, he was energized. He'd made connections with scholars at other institutions. Someone from a major archive had asked if we could consult on a similar project. Kellerman was already talking about a follow-up grant, a larger project that would expand the methodology to other document types. At our next team meeting, Kellerman spent 20 minutes talking about the conference response, about the doors that were opening, about how this work was putting our department on the map. Then he turned to me. "Ian, great news. Based on the conference interest, I've got funding to hire an undergraduate programmer to help with implementation. That should free you up to focus on your coursework and exams." I felt the ground tilt under me. "You're taking me off the project?" "Not off. We're redistributing responsibilities. Bryce will manage the technical work going forward, with support from the undergrad. You'll stay on in an advisory capacity." "Advisory capacity. You've built a solid foundation now. We need to focus on scaling and sustainability. That requires different skills." I looked around the table. Angela was staring at her laptop. Connor was studying his hands. Bryce was looking at Kellerman with an expression of careful neutrality. "I built the entire system," I said quietly, "and we're all grateful for your contributions. But the project is evolving. We need people who can handle the next phase." "Which is what?" "Bryce can explain the technical roadmap. I'm sure he'll bring you in for consultation when needed." I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice level. "I need to be clear about something. I'm not advising on a project I built. I'm not watching someone else manage my work. If I'm off the technical lead, I'm done." Kellerman's expression hardened. "That's your choice, Ian. But I'd encourage you to think carefully about what you're saying. This project is a major part of your CV. Walking away from it doesn't look good. Neither does exploitation." The word hung in the air. Angela looked up sharply. Connor shifted in his seat. Bryce's expression didn't change at all. Kellerman stood up slowly. "I think we're done here. Ian, when you're ready to have a professional conversation about this, my door is open. But if you're going to throw around accusations, we have nothing more to discuss." I left. Walked out of the meeting room, down the hall, out of the building into the cold October air. My whole body was vibrating with anger and fear and something like grief. I'd just destroyed my graduate career. I knew it even as I was doing it. You didn't accuse a prominent faculty member of exploitation and walk away unscathed. Not in a small department. Not when that faculty member controlled funding and recommendations and access to every opportunity that mattered. But I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep pretending it was fine. The next few weeks were brutal. Kellerman didn't speak to me. Bryce avoided eye contact when we passed in the hall. Angela sent me one text. "I understand why you did it, but I can't get involved." Connor just disappeared. Other faculty started treating me differently. Conversations would stop when I entered the department lounge. My advisor, a quiet, careful man named Dr. Chen, who specialized in archival theory, called me in for a meeting. "Ian, I need to talk to you about your situation with Dr. Kellerman." "What about it?" "He's told the department that you've become difficult to work with, that you're not adapting well to collaborative research environments." "Is that what he said?" "He's a senior colleague. I have to take his concerns seriously." "Did he mention that I built the entire technical infrastructure for his project and Bryce got all the credit?" Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. "I don't know the details of who did what, but I do know that publicly challenging a faculty member is... It's not wise, Ian. Academia is a small world. Reputations matter. So I should have just stayed quiet. I'm saying that you need to consider your long-term career. You're talented. You could have a good future in this field. But not if you get labeled as someone who creates conflict." The word was already spreading. I could feel it. Difficult, creates conflict, doesn't work well with others. I tried to focus on my coursework, but everything felt poisoned now. I'd see Kellerman in the hallway, and my stomach would clench. I'd overhear other grad students talking about the newspaper project, how well it was going, how impressive Bryce's work was, and I'd have to leave the room before I said something I'd regret. In November, I saw a job posting for a technical position at the university's IT department. Digital systems support, helping faculty with research computing infrastructure. It was full-time, which meant I'd have to leave the graduate program, but it paid actual money and I wouldn't have to deal with Kellerman or Bryce or the whole toxic environment. I applied, got an interview. They offered me the position. I sat in my apartment for 3 days trying to decide. My lease was month to month. I had no savings. If I left academia, I'd probably never come back. It wasn't the kind of path you could exit and re-enter easily. But staying meant finishing a degree in a department where I'd already been marked as a problem. My dad called me on the 4th day. "You sound miserable," he said. "I don't know what to do." "Then let me ask you this. 5 years from now, which choice will you regret less?" I accepted the IT job, withdrew from the graduate program in December, sent a brief professional email to Dr. Chen explaining my decision. Didn't give a reason beyond pursuing other opportunities. Kellerman never responded to my withdrawal. Neither did Bryce. Angela sent me a short message. "I'm sorry it worked out this way. Good luck." I started the IT job in January. It was fine, boring, but fine. I helped professors troubleshoot software problems, maintained servers, occasionally built small database applications for research projects. I was good at it. People appreciated my work. Nobody tried to take credit for what I did, but I felt like a ghost. I'd walk through campus and see graduate students carrying books, heading to seminars, living the intellectual life I'd wanted. I'd avoided the 3rd floor of the library entirely, couldn't bear to go back to the place where I'd been so hopeful. In March, I saw an announcement that the newspaper digitization project had received additional funding, a follow-up grant for $300,000 to expand the scope. The announcement quoted Kellerman praising the innovative technical leadership of Bryce Callahan and the groundbreaking methodologies developed by our team. I showed the announcement to a coworker, a guy named Derek who'd worked in IT for a decade. "You know this project? I built the core technology for it." "But they're crediting this Bryce guy?" "Yeah," Derek shook his head. "That's academia, man. Grad students are cheap labor. Professors milk them for everything, then throw them away when they stop being useful." I'd heard that analysis before, but hearing it while working a job I didn't care about, in a building where nobody knew my name, it hit differently. I hadn't just left a graduate program. I'd been pushed out for insisting on basic recognition. The anger started then. Not the hot, immediate anger from the confrontation. This was colder, deeper, a baseline fury that colored everything. I started thinking about revenge, not anything dramatic or violent. Just, I wanted Kellerman to know what he'd done, Wanted Bryce to feel some fraction of what I'd felt. Wanted them to face consequences, but I had no leverage. I was a 24-year-old dropout working IT support. They were successful academics with grants and publications and reputations. The system had declared a winner, and it wasn't me. I worked the IT job for 18 months, saved money, lived cheaply, taught myself new programming languages at night. Not for any particular reason, just because it was something I could control. I built small applications and put them on GitHub. Started contributing to open source projects. Nothing exciting, just steady work that slowly made me more capable. In June of that year, my dad died. Heart attack, sudden and complete. He was grading essays in his study and just stopped. I flew home to Ohio, helped my mom plan the funeral, stood in the cemetery while they lowered his coffin into the ground, and tried to understand that he was really gone. Afterward, my mom and I sat in his study. The room still smelled like him, coffee and old paper and the particular scent of his preferred brand of red pens. She was sorting through his things, deciding what to keep. "He was proud of you," she said quietly, "even after you left school. He said you'd been treated unfairly, and he respected that you stood up for yourself." Lot of good it did me. "Ian." She looked at me with those sharp librarian eyes. "Your father spent 40 years teaching kids who mostly didn't care about literature. He dealt with administrators who undermined him, parents who blamed him for their children's failures, budget cuts that made his job harder every year. But he kept showing up because he believed the work mattered. That's what he taught you. Not to accept injustice, to know what you stand for." I flew back to my empty apartment and tried to figure out what I stood for. I kept seeing Paul, the computer science grad student who'd asked about my OCR work. He'd said I should publish the technical approach independently. At the time, I'd dismissed it. I was still part of the project, still bound by collaborative expectations. But I wasn't part of anything now. I had no obligation to Kellerman or Bryce or the university, and I had copies of everything. All my code, all my documentation, all my test results. I'd kept it all in my personal repository, backed up religiously. I spent 3 months writing a technical paper, not about the newspaper project specifically, but about the general methodology for improving OCR accuracy on historical documents using machine learning. I described the algorithms I'd developed, the training approaches, the validation methods. I included detailed performance data, compared my results to existing commercial software, explained why my approach worked better. I submitted it to a computer science conference. Not a prestigious one. I had no affiliations, no academic credentials anymore. Just my name and an email address. But the work was solid. The results were real. The paper was accepted. I registered for the conference using money from my IT job. Flew to Seattle in October. Presented my work to a room of maybe 30 people. Most of them were academics or industry researchers. I was terrified they'd dismiss me, ask what right I had to be there. Instead, they asked technical questions, smart questions. They wanted to know about implementation details, about how the approach could be adapted for different document types, about performance on damaged pages. I answered every question, showed them data, explained my decisions. After the presentation, 3 people gave me their business cards. One was a researcher at a museum. One worked for a company that did document digitization for archives. One was a professor at a university I'd never heard of, doing similar work with different materials. The professor, his name was Dr. Ibrahim Mansour, took me to coffee. "This is impressive work," he said. "How did you develop this?" I told him the whole story. The graduate program, the project, Kellerman, Bryce, the credit theft, my withdrawal. I thought he might be judgmental, might think I'd failed somehow. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I've seen this pattern many times. sometimes with faculty exploiting students, sometimes with students exploiting each other. Academia has very few mechanisms for addressing it. The power differentials are too large. So what do people do? Most of them accept it. Take their degree, move on, tell themselves it's the cost of entry. A few get angry enough to leave, like you did. Very few turn it into something productive. Is that what I did? You published your work under your own name. You presented it in a public forum. You made it impossible for anyone to claim they invented this approach. That's more than most people manage. The museum researcher emailed me the next week. Her name was Dr. Clarissa Brown. She was working on digitizing a collection of 19th century medical journals, having major problems with OCR accuracy. Would I be willing to consult? She could pay. I said yes. We worked remotely. I'd adapt my tools to her documents, run tests, provide the customized software. She paid me $2,000 for 3 weeks of work. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was the first time anyone had paid me for technical expertise rather than general IT support. Word spread slowly. Digital humanities is a small field. People talk to each other at conferences, share resources, recommend consultants. By spring, I had 3 more clients. Archives, museums, historical societies. Everyone had old documents they needed digitized. Everyone was frustrated with commercial OCR software, and everyone had heard about this guy who'd built better tools. I quit the IT job, started freelancing full-time, built a simple website explaining my services, document digitization, OCR optimization, database development, all the skills I'd developed on Kellerman's project. Set my rates deliberately low at first, just to build a client base and portfolio. The work was satisfying in a way the IT job never was. Each project was different document types, different technical challenges, different institutions with different needs. I was solving real problems, and the people hiring me genuinely appreciated the results. By the end of that year, I had 12 clients. Small projects mostly, but steady income. I raised my rates. Started turning down work that didn't interest me. Hired a part-time contractor to help with the more repetitive tasks. I never checked on Kellerman or the newspaper project. I didn't want to know. Didn't want to torture myself with updates about their success. But in December, Dr. Chen, my former advisor, sent me an email. Subject line, FYI. The email contained a link to a university press release. The newspaper digitization project was facing major problems. The OCR system had broken down. The custom tools were producing increasingly poor results, and nobody on the current team knew how to fix them. They'd brought in a commercial vendor to take over the technical work, which had blown through most of their contingency budget. The project was now 18 months behind schedule and at risk of not meeting the grant deliverables. I read the press release twice. Then I read Dr. Chen's accompanying message. I thought you'd want to know. Several faculty have privately asked whether you might be willing to consult, but Kellerman has made it clear you're not welcome. His reputation is taking a beating over this. Chen. I sat with that information for a long time. Part of me felt vindicated. The system I'd built only worked because I understood it deeply. Bryce had managed to maintain it for a while, but he'd never really understood the underlying architecture. Once things started breaking, he couldn't fix them. But another part of me just felt tired. Even their failure didn't change anything. I'd still been pushed out. I still had no credential, no affiliation, no formal recognition for what I'd built. I didn't respond to Dr. Chen. Deleted the email and went back to work. My business kept growing. In the second year, I brought on 2 full-time employees, both recent grads who'd struggled to find good positions, who were grateful for meaningful work and decent pay. We moved into a small office space, bought better equipment, started taking on larger projects. I gave the company a name, Archival Solutions Group. Nothing fancy, direct and professional. By year 3, we had contracts with major institutions, the State Historical Society, 2 university libraries, a museum consortium. We'd developed a reputation for solving difficult problems, for being responsive and reliable, for delivering results that actually worked. I stayed away from conferences, didn't publish papers, kept my head down and focused on the work. I didn't want academic recognition anymore. That system had rejected me. I'd build success on different terms. Then in March of year 4, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Ian, this is Bryce Callahan." I felt my whole body tense. Hadn't heard his voice in 4 years. It sounded different, older, more strained. "What do you want, Bryce?" I need your help. The newspaper project is in serious trouble. The OCR system has completely failed. We've lost almost 2 years of work. The grant agency is threatening to pull funding and demand repayment. Kellerman is..." He paused. "This could destroy the department's reputation." "That's unfortunate. Ian, please. I know how you must feel. I know I should have said something back then. I should have made sure you got proper credit. But this is bigger than past conflicts. If this project fails, it affects everyone in the department. Graduate students, junior faculty, people who had nothing to do with what happened. Why are you calling me?" "Because you're the only person who understands the system well enough to fix it. I've tried. I've brought in other consultants. Nobody can figure out what's broken." "And Kellerman agreed to this call?" Long pause. "He doesn't know I'm calling you." "So you want me to save the project that I was forced out of, without the person who forced me out even having to ask? I know it's not fair, but I'm asking anyway." I should have hung up. Should have told him to go to hell. Told him they'd made their choice 4 years ago, and now they could live with the consequences. Instead I said, "Send me the technical documentation. I'll look at it." "Really? Ian, thank you. I haven't agreed to anything. I'll look at the documentation. If it's interesting enough, I'll consider consulting. At my standard rate." "What's your standard rate?" $300 an hour, minimum 20-hour commitment. Silence. Then, "That's $6,000. "That's correct. The project doesn't have that kind of budget." "Then you don't have my help. Your choice." He sent the documentation that evening. I opened it, started reading through the technical specifications and error logs. The system was a mess. Bryce had tried to modify my original code without understanding the dependencies. He'd updated libraries without testing compatibility. He'd changed parameters in the machine learning models to try to improve performance, but he'd broken the training process. The whole system was held together with duct tape and prayers. It would take me maybe 20 hours to fix, probably less. I could see the problems immediately, knew exactly what needed to be restored and what could be salvaged. I called Bryce back. I reviewed the documentation. "Can you fix it?" "Yes." "Will you?" $7,000. 35 hours at my rate, including documentation and knowledge transfer. You get the system working again, plus detailed instructions so you don't break it next time. Take it or leave it. "I need to talk to Kellerman." "No, this is between you and me. I'm not working with Kellerman. I'm not setting foot in that department. I'm not attending any meetings or accepting any acknowledgement. You pay me, I fix your system remotely, I disappear. Those are the terms. How do I explain this to the department? That's your problem. Do we have a deal or not? I'll figure it out. Yes, we have a deal." He paid half up front. I spent 3 weeks working nights and weekends, digging into their broken code, restoring what I'd originally built, carefully undoing all of Bryce's well-intentioned modifications. It was like archaeological reconstruction, finding the pieces of something I'd made years ago and putting them back together. The system worked. Not perfectly. It never had been perfect, but it worked as well as it had when I'd first built it. I wrote detailed documentation explaining what I'd fixed and why, what parameters could safely be adjusted, and which ones would break everything if touched. I sent Bryce the repaired system and the documentation. He paid the remaining balance. "Thank you," he wrote in the email. "You saved us." I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, I got another call. Unknown number again. This time I knew better than to answer, but I did anyway. "Ian, this is Dr. Chen. I hope I'm not intruding." "What do you need, Dr. Chen?" "I wanted to let you know that Kellerman is retiring. Effective end of the semester. The newspaper project problems were part of it, but there were also questions about his management of graduate students. Some complaints were filed. Good for them. The department is in a difficult position. Our reputation has suffered. We are struggling to recruit new graduate students. Faculty don't want to collaborate with us. Grant agencies are skeptical. We need to rebuild trust." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the department chair wants to offer you a position." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. "You're joking." "A non-tenure track faculty position. Teaching and research in digital humanities. It would be a fresh start. A way to legitimize your work. Give you the institutional support you... No. Ian, please consider... Let me be very clear, Dr. Chen. That department stole my work, destroyed my reputation, and pushed me out when I objected. Now you want me to come back because you need someone to repair the damage? No. Absolutely not. I have a successful business. I have clients who respect me. I have employees who depend on me. I don't need academic legitimacy, and I definitely don't need your institutional support. I understand you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm done. Tell the department chair thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested in rejoining a system that treats people as disposable. I hung up. My business kept growing. By year 5, we had 15 employees and contracts in 8 states. We'd become the go-to consultancy for complex digitization projects. Our clients included major libraries, national archives, museums with world-class collections. We charged premium rates and delivered exceptional results. I bought a house, small, but mine. Started dating someone, a woman named Rachel, who taught middle school art and had no connection to academia. We'd meet for dinner and she'd tell me about her students' projects, about the weird politics of public school teaching, about anything except universities and research grants and credit battles. Life was good, not perfect, but good, stable, under my control. Then in year 6, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. Subject line: Digital Humanities Grant Opportunity. The email was from a program officer at the National Endowment for the Humanities. They were developing a new initiative to support innovative digitization methodologies. They wanted to fund projects that could demonstrate significant advances in access to historical materials. They were looking for partners with strong technical capabilities and proven track records. Your work came highly recommended, the email said. We're particularly interested in your OCR optimization approach. Would you be interested in discussing a potential grant application? The grant was for $500,000 over 3 years. I read the email 3 times. Then I looked at who'd recommended me. There was a list of references attached. Dr. Ibrahim Mansour, the professor I'd met at that first conference. Dr. Clarissa Brown, my first client. 3 other people I'd worked with over the years. And at the bottom of the list, Dr. Michael Chen, Midwestern State University. I called Chen. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. Why did you recommend me, Indrat? I asked. Because your work is excellent and you deserve recognition. That's not what I asked. He was quiet for a moment. The department needs partners for this grant initiative. We have the institutional infrastructure, the academic credibility, but we don't have strong technical capabilities anymore. Not after Kellerman. If we want to rebuild our reputation in digital humanities, we need to work with people who actually know what they're doing. So you need me. Yes. What's in it for me? I already have more work than I can handle. Money, prestige, the chance to work on projects at a scale your business couldn't access independently. And, he paused, the chance to show everyone who said you couldn't make it in this field that they were wrong. I should have said no, should have stayed in my lane, kept my business running, avoided getting pulled back into academic politics. But $500,000 would let me hire more people, take on more ambitious projects, build tools that could serve hundreds of institutions instead of just the ones who could afford my consulting rates. And yes, part of me wanted to prove something, wanted to walk back into that world as someone they needed rather than someone they could dismiss. I'll need full control of the technical work, I said. No interference from faculty, no credit theft. Everything I build belongs to my company, and we license it to the project. I can't promise that without talking to the dean. Then talk to the dean. Call me back when you have an answer. He called back 6 hours later. Done. You have full technical control. Intellectual property remains with your company. The university gets a perpetual license for the specific tools you develop, but you own the underlying methodology and can use it for other projects. Who's the faculty lead on this? I am. Not Kellerman? Kellerman is retired. This is my project. I thought about it. Chen had never been actively hostile. He'd been cautious, careful, maybe too willing to accept Kellerman's version of events. But he'd also been the one to send me that FYI email when the project started failing. He'd been the one to recommend me for this grant. Send me the grant framework. I'll review it and let you know. We spent 3 months developing the grant proposal. It was genuinely good work. An ambitious plan to create open-source tools for historical document digitization, with case studies at multiple institutions, built-in evaluation metrics, and a sustainability plan for after the grant ended. Chen handled the academic framing. I handled the technical design. We met weekly over video calls, hashed out details, revised and refined. The grant was approved in November, $500,000, 3-year timeline. My company as the technical lead, the university as the institutional partner. The project kicked off in January. I hired 3 more employees specifically for the grant work. We set up regular meetings with partner institutions. Chen managed the academic side, the conferences, the publications, the relationship with NEH. I managed the actual work. It was everything the newspaper project should have been. Clear roles, proper credit, intellectual honesty about who was contributing what. Chen made sure my company was named in every presentation, every paper, every public communication. When reporters asked about the project, he'd direct them to me for technical questions. In year 2 of the grant, Midwestern State hosted a symposium on digital humanities. They invited me to give a keynote talk about the project. I almost said no, didn't want to set foot on that campus again. But Rachel convinced me. It's been 8 years, she said. You're successful now. You're there as an equal, not a graduate student they can push around. Go show them what they lost. I went. Flew to the city, stayed in a hotel, drove to campus the morning of the symposium. The event was in the library building, in a conference room on the 2nd floor, not the 3rd floor where the department offices were. I was grateful for that. The room was full. Maybe 200 people, faculty, graduate students, librarians, people from other institutions. I saw Dr. Chen near the front, looking nervous. Saw Angela Reyes, my old teammate, sitting in the back row. She caught my eye and gave a small nod. I gave my talk. explained the technical challenges of digitizing historical documents at scale, demonstrated the tools we'd built, showed results from partner institutions, improved accuracy, reduced costs, better access for researchers, talked about the open source philosophy, about building tools that serve the public good rather than just institutional prestige. The audience asked good questions, technical questions, implementation questions, questions about adapting the approach for different contexts. I answered them all. Felt that old satisfaction of knowing something deeply enough to explain it clearly. Afterward, there was a reception. I stood by the coffee table, not really wanting to socialize, when someone approached from my left. Bryce Callahan. Older, grayer, dressed in professional academic casual, blazer, jeans, expensive shoes. Ian, that was an excellent presentation. I looked at him, didn't say anything. I've been following your company's work, really impressive growth. You've built something significant. Thank you. I wanted to apologize for what happened on the newspaper project. The way credit was handled wasn't fair to you. I should have pushed back, should have insisted that your contributions were properly recognized. Why didn't you? He looked uncomfortable. I was ambitious. Kellerman was offering me opportunities I thought I needed. I told myself that's just how things worked, that you'd have your turn eventually. But that was cowardice, not pragmatism. I'm sorry. I believed he was sincere. Also believed it didn't matter. Do you need something, Bryce? No, I wanted you to know that I've thought about it, about what happened, about the choices I made. I'm a full professor now. I have my own graduate students, and I try to treat them better than Kellerman treated us. That's good, genuinely. But we're not going to be friends, and I'm not going to tell you it's okay. You made your choices. I made mine. We both have to live with that. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Good luck with your work, Ian. He walked away. I stayed by the coffee table, hands shaking slightly, trying to process what had just happened. Angela appeared beside me. You all right? Yeah, that was just weird. He feels guilty, has for years. Sometimes mentions you in department meetings, talks about how the project wouldn't have succeeded without your foundational work. Little late for that. I know. She looked down at her coffee cup. For what it's worth, I feel guilty too. I should have supported you. Should have said something. But I was scared of jeopardizing my own position. Did you finish your degree? Yeah. Teaching now at a small liberal arts college. It's fine. Not prestigious. But the students are good, and nobody's stealing anyone's work. She smiled slightly. I tell my students about you sometimes, about what happens when institutions fail to protect their people. Use you as an example of someone who succeeded anyway. I'm not sure that's the right moral. Maybe not, but it's better than the alternative. She hesitated. I'm glad you came back, even just for a day. You should know that most of the department respects what you built. We know the real story. Dr. Chen found me before I left. Thank you for coming. Your talk was the highlight of the symposium. It went well. I have something to tell you. The dean wants to establish a permanent institute for digital humanities. Funded position, staff, budget for projects. They want you to direct it. As faculty? As director, you'd have an appointment, but the focus would be on managing projects and building partnerships, not teaching or publishing. You'd run it like a research center. Your company could be the technical arm. The university provides institutional support and infrastructure. I shook my head. I already turned down a faculty position. This is different. You wouldn't be joining a department that mistreated you. You'd be building something new, and you'd have real power, control over hiring, budget, project selection. You could create the kind of environment you wished you'd had as a graduate student. Why would I want to do that? because it would let you work at a larger scale, because it would give you access to resources and networks your business can't reach independently, and because, he looked at me carefully, because you care about this work, about making historical materials accessible, about training the next generation of people who do this work with integrity. I've watched you over these past 2 years. You're not just building a business, you're trying to fix a broken system. I thought about my dad and his study, grading papers for students who mostly didn't care, showing up year after year because he believed it mattered. Can I think about it? Of course, but I hope you'll say yes. I drove back to the hotel, called Rachel, told her about the offer. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to say no, just on principle. They don't get to push me out and then invite me back when it's convenient. But it's not the same people. Kellerman's gone, the department has changed, and the work would be good work, important work, bigger than what I can do independently. Then you already know your answer. I accepted the position, negotiated hard on the terms, salary, autonomy, guaranteed budget, explicit protection for my company's intellectual property. Got everything in writing. Started the new role in July. The institute was small at first. Me, 2 staff members, a graduate assistant. We occupied offices on the 4th floor of the library, 1 floor above where I'd started as a graduate student a decade earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. We took on projects the way my company had, carefully, selectively, focused on quality and sustainability rather than just volume. But now we had institutional backing, could apply for larger grants, could partner with other universities, could train graduate students in methods that actually prepared them for careers, whether in academia or industry. I made a point of meeting with every graduate student who worked with the institute, told them explicitly, you will be credited for your contributions, you will be named on publications, you will own your work. If anyone violates those principles, you come to me immediately. Some of them looked skeptical, like they couldn't quite believe an academic institution would operate that way. But we followed through. Published papers with graduate students as lead authors when they'd done the lead work, helped them build portfolios, connected them with job opportunities, created the environment I'd wished for 10 years ago. The newspaper digitization project, the one I'd been forced out of, was finally completed in my 3rd year running the institute. Bryce invited me to the launch event. I didn't go. Sent a polite email declining, offered congratulations on the completion. That part of my life was closed, but I did look at the final published database. It was impressive, genuinely. Hundreds of thousands of pages, fully searchable, freely available to anyone with internet access. The methodology documentation credited the technical approach to foundational work by Ian Brennan, further developed by the project team. It was more acknowledgement than I'd ever gotten while I was there. It was still fundamentally inadequate. In year 4, the Institute published its first major research output, a comprehensive toolkit for historical document digitization, released as open-source software. The tool had been developed by 2 graduate students under my supervision. Their names were listed first on all the documentation. My name was listed as advisory supervisor. The institute was credited as the supporting institution. The toolkit was downloaded 5,000 times in the first month. Libraries and archives around the world started using it. I got emails from researchers I'd never met, thanking me for making their work possible. That's when I realized something had shifted. I wasn't proving anything anymore. Wasn't trying to show anyone they'd been wrong about me. I was just doing work that mattered, with people who shared that commitment. The anger that had lived in my chest for years, that cold, constant fury, had transmuted into something else. Not forgiveness exactly. I didn't forgive Kellerman or Bryce or the system that had failed me, but I'd stopped waiting for them to make it right. I'd built something better instead. Last year, I got an email from a first-year graduate student in the information science department. He'd heard about the institute, wanted to know if there were opportunities to get involved. His name was Trevor. He was smart, anxious, unsure if he belonged in graduate school. He'd done well in his coursework, but was worried about finding a research project, about navigating faculty politics, about whether he'd be taken seriously. I met with him in my office, listened to his concerns, saw myself a decade earlier, standing in Kellerman's office, hoping to be chosen for something important. Here's what I can tell you, I said. Academia is broken in a lot of ways. Faculty exploit graduate students. Credit gets stolen. People get pushed out for being difficult when they're really just insisting on being treated fairly. It happened to me. It might happen to you. He looked alarmed. But here's what else I can tell you. You don't have to accept that. You can push back. You can leave. You can build something on your own terms. And if you choose to stay, you can work to create better environments for the people who come after you. None of those choices are easy, but they're all possible. What did you do? All of it. Pushed back, left, built something else, came back. Took me 10 years. Cost me a lot. But I'm here now, and I have the power to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to students I'm responsible for. So should I work with the Institute? If you want to do digitization work, yes. If your interests are elsewhere, I can help you find other opportunities. But if you work with me, you'll be credited for your contributions. You'll own your work. And if anyone tries to exploit you, I'll go to war over it. He ended up joining one of our projects. He's doing good work. We'll have his first publication next year, his name listed first. I still run my company, still direct the Institute. The two things complement each other. The company gives me financial independence and real-world grounding. The Institute gives me resources and scale. I make more money than I ever would have as a traditional academic. Have more autonomy, more control over my work and my life. But I pay for it in other ways. I still tense up when I walk through campus. Still feel that spike of anxiety when I see the third floor of the library. Still occasionally wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about Kellerman's office, about Bryce presenting my work, about Angela's apologetic text. Message. Rachel asks me sometimes if I'm happy. I tell her yes, which is true. But it's a different kind of happiness than I imagined when I was 22 and starting graduate school. That version of me thought success meant recognition, belonging, being valued by the institutions I respected. This version of me knows that institutions are just structures built and maintained by people. They can help or harm. They can recognize talent or waste it. They can change, but only when people force them to change. I force them to change, not through revolution or moral persuasion, but by building something they eventually needed, by becoming valuable enough that they had to acknowledge me on my terms rather than theirs. The newspaper project taught me that academia runs on a fundamental dishonesty, the gap between what it claims to value and what it actually rewards. It claims to value truth and knowledge and intellectual contribution. It actually values obedience and institutional loyalty and the preservation of hierarchy. I couldn't operate in that gap. Some people can. They're probably better adjusted than I am. But I needed the work I did to match the values I believed in. And the only way to achieve that was to build my own system. Last month, Kellerman died. I saw the obituary in the university newsletter. He'd been retired 5 years, living in Arizona, apparently writing a memoir about his career in digital humanities. The obituary praised his pioneering work in document digitization and his dedication to training the next generation of scholars. No mention of exploitation, no mention of the students he'd used and discarded. History had been written, and he was the hero. I didn't feel much of anything reading it. Not satisfaction at outliving him. Not anger that he'd never faced consequences. just a kind of weary acceptance that this was how things worked. But here's what I know. The newspaper database people use today runs on technology I built. The tools researchers around the world are using for document digitization are built on methodologies I developed. The graduate students working at the institute I direct are being trained in an environment where their contributions are recognized and their work is their own. Kellerman's memoir won't change any of that. His reputation won't erase what I built. I won. Not in the way I wanted to when I was 23 and full of naive idealism about how academia should work, but in the way that actually matters. I survived. I built something that lasts. I changed the system just enough that the next person who faces what I faced might have one more option. That's not triumphant. It's not a movie ending, but it's real. I think about my dad sometimes in his study with his red pen and his students' essays. He knew the system was broken, knew administrators would undermine him and parents would blame him, and budget cuts would make his job harder every year. But he kept showing up because he believed the work mattered. I'm doing the same thing, showing up, doing work that matters, building environments where other people can do work that matters, refusing to let institutional failure determine what's possible. The cost is permanent. I'm not the person I would have been if Kellerman had treated me fairly. I'm harder, more suspicious, less willing to trust institutional promises. That's not heroic. It's just damage. But the alternative, staying silent, accepting exploitation, letting them write me out of history, that would have cost more. So here I am, director of an institute I built from nothing, running a successful company, training students who won't be exploited the way I was, living a life that's mine, built on my terms, outside the system that tried to destroy me. I won. It changed me permanently. I'm still not sure which one matters more. Stories like this happen more often than we think. Subscribe if you want to hear the ones that usually stay unspoken. And if this story made you pause, a like helps the channel grow.